Welcome back to JMC Live. At the break, Miranda shared that the stalker found her and she faced her ultimate fear of her life. Instead of running away, instead of making excuses for not knowing what to say, her family stood with her as the man entered her house, acting like nothing ever happened. And after a few minutes passed by, and now after 11 years, the stalker has never been back. Never called, never contacted, never mailed anything. And this point of her life is now past. But there's more to this story that you're not aware of, because this man was also friends to someone else that Miranda knew in high school, that Miranda has gone to church with, that saw in high school and possibly even younger grades. This man, as you will find out, became a big part of her life. Miranda?
So after I confront my stalker, and he finally leaves and doesn't come back. A few months later, I'm out of high school, and I've pretty much recovered from the breakdown I went through, and I tried to move on with my life, and so things were getting better. I was back in church regularly. I was back playing my music, and I was back to traveling and playing drums for different gospel groups who just said, hey, we need a drummer, can you come play for us? So I was doing that, and around the fall of 1999 I reconnect with a guy that I had been really good friends with in high school. He had dated a friend of mine when I was a freshman. He was 2 grades older than a grade or 2 older than me. He was 3 years older than me. So when I was 18, he was 21. And so I reconnect with him. We start talking, and we just kind of mutually say, hey, we kind of like each other. Why don't we go out, start dating? So this is boyfriend number 2 officially. And so we start dating, and again, the pressure of having sex comes up again. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what is so important about having sex with me? Every guy that was around, they were like, it was all they wanted. And I thought, there's more to life than sex. And again, in my mind, when you're dating, you're not focused on that. But he started pressuring me little by little. But we dated. He went to church with me. He was talking about, starting to sing with me, and he wanted to do all this, ministry stuff with me. And boy, did I believe every bit of it. And so he really, he talked to my grandparents, he talked to my dad, and, really trying to befriend everybody. But something just wasn't clicking with my dad. My dad said, I just have this feeling there's something not right with him. And I said, oh, Dad, you got to be, you're just paranoid. Because sometimes my dad can get paranoid. Any father can, about the safety of their daughter, especially after these 2 past guys, the stalker and then the first boyfriend. So he's pretty protective of me. And I said, oh, Dad, I've known so-and-so. I've known him since I was a freshman in high school. We've been good friends. We rode the bus together, blah, 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 And so he's like, oh, okay, I'll give him a chance. But he just kept, we kept going to church together, but he kept persisting. Oh, let's have sex. And I looked at him one night and I said, I will not have sex until I get married. So when I said that, he started asking me to marry him. And it was constant, well, let's get married. And I said, why? I'm 18. I said, and I asked him, I said, do you really see yourself staying with me for the rest of your life, until we're like 80 years old and we die? Can you really see yourself wanting to be with me that long? And he's like, oh, yeah. I love you, and blah, blah, blah. And he had a part-time job. Not a permanent full-time job. He worked like kind of a construction thing. And so after a few months, he finally pressured me enough where I said, okay, let's get married. January 2000. I can't remember the date. I'm glad I don't.
So you waited until you got married to have sex?
No. We decided to get married, and then he said, well, since we're deciding to get married, it's okay to have sex. So we had sex. And I moved in with him where he was living at the time with his grandparents. And he said, oh, we'll get a place and blah, 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 and which never happened. If you've ever, I can tell you, if anybody's ever seen the movie with Farrah Fawcett, The Burning Bed, it's very much that scenario where she had to go and live with his parents, and when the abuse started, the parents kind of ignored the abuse. They didn't do anything to protect her, and if she called to try to do anything to protect herself, she was blamed for everything. So that's kind of where this was leading to. Almost identical, and I didn't realize it. And so we moved in. I moved in right before December, and we're living with his grandparents and his brother. And December comes, he gets me an engagement ring, and then in January we get married. My father said, I won't allow this marriage. There's something not right here. I just know there is. I don't like this guy. And that's it. I'm not coming to the wedding, blah blah blah. I won't give you away. So my mother's side of the family was the ones who helped pay for the wedding, and my grandfather, who now has passed away, gave me away. And so on our honeymoon, we go to a nice hotel, and we had been given some money, as newlyweds are given as gifts. And there never been any sign that he was a drinker before now. He says, well, I'm going to go down the street, and I'm going to go get some drinks. He comes back with a case of beer and all this alcohol, and I'm like, oh my Lord, what's going on? And he drinks, and he drinks, and he drinks, and he drinks, and he passes out and throws up on himself on the floor. And I'm sitting there in this nice bed, and I'm looking at this man on the floor covered in his own vomit, and I'm thinking, and I hear God say, this was not the man you were supposed to marry. And immediately I knew I was trapped. I was stuck. I had made a horrible decision in my life, and I had to bear it. So I tried to keep him from drinking. I tried to say, we don't need this alcohol. You don't need to drink. This is not good. It's only going to be bad for you. And he never stopped. So from January until May, he drank off and on. He kept saying, well, I need to find a job, a better job. Well, he finally finds a better job, and when he does, he never gives me any money. We never move out of his grandparents' house, and the abuse starts. And so I can remember one of the first times he would get a pack of beer. He'd come home from work. He'd work like noon to like 9 or something like that. He'd come home. He'd get a 12 pack of beer, and he'd drink the whole thing at night. And one night he'd drink the whole thing, and then he'd start yelling at me. He'd come in the room. He'd start yelling at me, and he'd say, "I want to have sex," and just blunt. And I said, I don't feel like having sex. And he totally changed. And he said, well, you're my wife. You have to do what I say. And I don't remember the first time I was raped, because there was just so many times. But the first one that I truly remember was I had locked the door, and he's beating on the door, and his grandparents can hear, everybody can hear, but they don't do anything. He's banging on the door saying, I'm going to break this blank door down if you don't open it. And I open it, and he grabs me, and he says, "Get undressed." And I said, "No." Now, if you know me, I'm a very hard-headed woman, and I'm not afraid. I'm like, I'm not afraid of you. You know, I'm like, you're not doing this to me. And I thought, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, there's people in this house and they can hear what's going on. They'll help me. No. He slams the door shut, and he kept saying, "Take your clothes off." And I said, "No." And I don't remember how many times he said it, but finally he walked over to me, and he ripped my shirt from the neck all the way down to the bottom seam. He ripped it straight down and ripped my clothes right off of me. And then he threw me on the bed, and he raped me. And that was less than 6 months after we got married. But that was one of the first that I remember. You never forget that. You never forget it. I don't care how many years has passed. You'll never forget when somebody violates you that way. And so, after he was done with me, he just leaves me there and walks out the room. And, you know, it's really hard. And I don't remember much. I know when it was happening, I was like there, but it was like I was separated from myself. It was like I was separating myself so I couldn't feel the physical pain at times, because he would really hurt me. And so I think Jeremy wants to take a break, and when we come back, I'm not going to share too much, but I do want to share one particular time, because I started singing out to God. I started singing a praise and worship, a Christian song. "I Will Praise the Lord." It's a Ray Bolt song. I started singing that song. And when I started singing that song, I got one of the worst beatings. One of the worst things that ever happened to me, just because I sang that song. So I'll turn over to Jeremy.
All right, we'll be right back.